It's June 20th, 2024. This is Roqe. Hi there, welcome to episode 327 of Roqe. I'm Jian Gomeshi. Hello from Toronto, Canada. Salam Dostan Aziz. Durud Bashama. Hope you're doing well wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Hi there, Pegah.
Hello.
Hello to people in Australia. You know, there's a lot of people who listen to us in Australia.
Hello to everyone in Australia.
And I feel like we don't always think about the people in Australia. Who will speak for the people in Australia other than the Australians?
Of course.
The Australian Iranian community, a strong community in Sydney. And it turns out I have a first cousin in Melbourne.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'd forgotten that. Hopefully he's not listening. It was amongst our Australian audience. Yeah, I forgot that he was no longer in Iran. He's in Melbourne.
Okay.
Which is a cool city.
A lot of Iranians go to Australia from Iran. Like there's like a big, I didn't know this. They go for like university and.
If we have a big diaspora. Yes, they come from Iran.
No, but
this is why you're smart, Pegah.
No, but what I'm trying
3 minutes later, there's Iranians.
He's not even letting me finish.
Okay,
I was saying is I often hear Iranians say, they're applying to universities in the United States and in Canada, and those are kind of first picks. But there's equally a demand and a want to go to universities in Australia, and I didn't know this until recently.
For a long time, it was easier, I believe. I don't know if that's still the case to get to Australia. But also, let me remind you, since I know we learned last week, you don't listen to our back episodes, even the ones that you've been part of. You've forgotten. We have had guests on before who've talked about going to Australia as on the promise of being refugees and then not being accepted there and ending up in these sort of refugee camps and that type of thing. So there's a lot of there can be some drama with going to Australia too, but actually there's more than a few people who on their way to Canada, it doesn't make sense geographically, but on their way to the West, Australia is the first stop sometimes. And of course, some people go there and stay there. And that's this amazing community in Sydney, where I think it's our number 6 or 7 city of listenership. Yeah. So while you focus on Ottawa, Ontario, nothing wrong with Ottawa, but I mean, let's face it, the Australians. Hello. Today on the show, Ali Hamedani. He, I've been really wanting to have him on for a while. We've been trading messages and I'm so glad this could happen. And interestingly, he is perhaps best known for his journalism with the BBC, not just with BBC Persian, but BBC World. He's done a lot of work for them over the years. He is just as of recently no longer with the BBC. Okay. And I think he's about to get a big gig somewhere else, or he's already got one, but he can't announce it yet, something like that. But it's a great occasion to have him on the show. He is a journalist. He is a reporter. He is an activist. He became very well known for covering and still does today for passionately covering the LGBTQI community inside Iran and outside in the diaspora and the issues associated with that. He is openly gay. And I think he's the first, there's some distinction, like the first openly gay Iranian journalist, prominent one at least. So we'll get to his story, all of that. Ali Hamedani joining me just a little bit from London. Speaking of London, can you see what I'm wearing?
Yes, I can.
I am wearing my England.
I commented on your shirt earlier today. I said, I like your shirt, Jian.
My official England jersey, my shit team.
I'm just shirt and then says
of course I'm always with my old thing. I've got England, I've got Canada, I've got Iran.
That's right.
When we're supporting Iran, we have to decide if it's cool to support Team Melli or not. But yeah, I England, the country of my birth. So and I grew up in England, and I'm a British citizen officially, along with being Canadian, and so I hopelessly support the English football team in international soccer, a team that has not won anything in my lifetime. Despite, like, I literally, since I was born, I cursed this team. They have not won anything.
I was going to ask how you felt about the game, but I mean.
Well, yeah, I'm a little hopped up because it just ended not that long ago. It was England-Denmark today.
Yes.
And the boys were shite. Fucking shite. I mean, it was really, these guys, I love these English players. Like the team we currently have are arguably the most talented team in the world for sheer talent. The coach, not so much. Don't get me started. So we tied against Denmark, which is not
enough.
Denmark is not one of the better teams right now, and this English team is supposed to go all the way, and
they tied.
Not the way they're playing, and even if they do, they're going to get to the semis and choke.
I mean, aside from Germany, I don't think anyone is doing all that fantastic.
Well, no, there's a few teams that are playing. I mean, Germany and France, and they all look like they're going to. The big teams look like we'll see with Italy and Spain. They're just playing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, England. Come on then, England. Come on. But I sport the jersey.
Yes, looks great.
I'll take some people will throw some tickets at me because I was wearing it in a little promo video we just did for tonight's, for this show.
Oh.
So
get ready for all the football fans and their opinions.
Euro time. Yeah, yeah. Actually, there's a surprising number of Iranians that do support England. Mostly they support Germany, the only country we're not racist about. with its clean past.
I feel like Iranians support a variety of countries.
Yeah.
Like in Europe. It's like Germany, France, Italy, England, even Netherlands.
Yeah.
There's a big following for
I like to support the colonial powers.
Yes.
The imperialists.
That's the way.
No, it's the old thing. England, Arsenal, and the Leafs, like a losing legacy. Arsenal has thankfully done a little better. I sure do. You don't want me as your fan because apparently you keep losing. Yeah. Anyway, come on, England. We can do this. All right. In the meantime, here in Canada, the big news over the last 24 hours has been, and on a much more serious note, has been that finally, after years and years of begging, pleading, coercing, or attempting to coerce, making the case, arguing, many Iranians, many activists, many people in high places trying to appeal to the Canadian government for the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, to be put on the terrorist list for their terrorism that they mete out in the name of and with the Islamic Republic of Iran. After years of trying to get this IRGC on the terrorist list to no avail, yesterday, somewhat surprisingly, and maybe even seemingly randomly, although nothing is random, the Canadian government held a press conference and announced that the IRGC is now on the terrorist list.
Yes.
Heretofore, which is huge news. Very much something for many people to celebrate. But in fact, such big news that you're coughing and sneezing at the thought of it.
Yeah.
Just I think the word IRGC or the moniker, the initials. So I mean, it's big news that a lot of people have been celebrating, and at the same time, just this announcement raises a lot of questions. Some of which I even put up in a little video last night, where I was sort of saying, "Oh, this is great, but why did it take so long? Why now? And what will this actually mean if it isn't enforced?" Now, Ardeshir Zarehzadeh, or Zarehzadeh, as you may know him, he is a lawyer who has been diligently working on this. He is of the political bent, but he's also, I think, back to the Harper government in Canada, like about 15 years ago, started making the case for putting the IRGC on the terrorist list. He's also he's worked with the families of PS 752.
Right.
So he's about to come in the studio, and I'm going to get a debrief from him on what he thinks this means, why it's important, and his reaction to why it came at this point and why it hasn't come until now. But in the meantime, curious to get your thoughts, Smart Pegah. What did you think when you heard the news?
I've been seeing a lot of people post on social media and kind of look at this as a win and celebrating it and posting all sorts of commentary like, yes, finally, all of that. And I'm happy about it, don't get me wrong, but I don't look at it as a win in that sense, because the same questions that you posed actually on Instagram, the first thought that I had was, well, first of all, why now? This has been years in the making by the Iranian diaspora. We've been asking, begging, pleading. I mean, you would have thought that after the killing of Mahsa Amini, something like this would have happened. Maybe that would have been a better time for something like this.
If Justin Trudeau is going to walk amongst the protesters, why not at that point say, we're going to do this?
So, the skeptical side of me is thinking we've got elections looming, there's things like that happening. Is this just a political ploy? Is that why this is happening now? So, I had all sorts of thoughts.
Wouldn't be surprising if it was.
Yes.
The Iranian vote for, that used to, not that long ago, that would sound like a joke.
Mm-hmm.
What Iranian vote?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people are you talking about? But now we're in the hundreds of thousands in Canada, many Canadian citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a significant block. If that group en masse moves, which traditionally did vote Liberal, moves to the Conservatives or
which
doesn't vote or whatever, which it looks like it would. Yeah. I mean, we were at that rally, the big 80,000 rally in Richmond Hill during the height of the Women Life Freedom movement, where there was booing for the Liberal minister that came up, and when Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, spoke there, the place erupted, right?
That's right.
So if that is the case, and that is a big voting bloc, then it wouldn't be surprising if this was a political decision. As cynical as that sounds, you want to take them at their word, and surely there are people within the Liberal Party whose hearts are in the right place.
Absolutely.
But it does, the timing is so weird.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in particular has happened, other than ongoing lobbying from activists, etc. So it does raise questions. Is that by-election that's coming up playing a role in this?
Exactly. Yeah. So, that was my first thought. But then, of course, we've talked about this on this program so many times that any sort of, headline like this in the news is always good for the main cause, which is to raise continuous awareness about the atrocities committed at the hands of the Islamic regime. So for that, I was very happy. I was happy that, we're finally starting to make some strides, and there's more coverage, more information, more decisions, more action, all of that. But I am concerned. My final point will be that I'm concerned. How is this going to actually benefit us in the long run? Mm-hmm. Is this one of those things where it's just, yay, we did it, and that's it?
Well, I almost, I had that initial reaction as well. And I begrudge myself that reaction. I really lament that is my reaction, because for those celebrating this, to a certain extent, I appreciate, I don't want to suggest they're naive, but I appreciate the hope that is in celebrating something like this. Like, we worked at something, we got, and surely there were people who were really working at this for years. Ardeshir is one of them, actually, to give him credit. He's about to come in the studio, who worked at this for years. And this is an accomplishment, surely it's an accomplishment. And I don't want to fall into that.
That cynicism.
Yeah. Even when I posted this thing yesterday, at least half the comments were, oh, give me a break, as if this is going to mean anything. What about Hamid Nouri? Just like the UN, like over and over again, people just kind of going, we're so used to being let down. We're so used to being alone as Iranians around the world with no real support, institutional support, national support, international support, etc., that it's easier almost when something like this happens to go
disappointed,
what the fuck, as if this means anything, and then to point out and go, see, when nothing comes of it. But maybe this, surely it's a step. And my initial reaction was, this is interesting. Now what? How do you make sure, because otherwise it is a symbolic gesture. And frankly, there are other groups that have been labeled terrorist groups, and we don't necessarily see action being taken, there has to be some kind of follow-up to this that feels and looks tangible. And just again, looking through comments of people that posting even on my page or whatever, saying send people back to Iran then. cut off the funding lines, do something, just saying now that, okay, we put them on the terrorist list isn't enough.
Yeah. Well, I think, this designation does allow Canada to impose more rigorous sanctions. It does allow for review of financial or material evidences. It does allow for people to actually be part of investigations now under the criminal code as a result of anything that might link them to the IRGC. So all of that is great, but that's exactly been my question is, we haven't heard anything about how these quote unquote investigations are going to materialize. What are they going to do? Are they just going to start looking through a list of people that they've had on some sort of a tip list? Is it, what's happening here? What does this actually mean and how is it going to play out? So I think, I'm happy that this has happened. I think it's the first step to a bigger plan that's going to be put in place. But there's also concerns with this. I mean, one of the reasons why this has taken so long is because there's always been a conversation about what happens to individuals who are part of the mandatory military service in Iran.
Yes, that's an issue. But I always thought that could be carved out, and I hope it will be, that those people won't be affected. You want to explain that issue?
Yeah. So out of the annual intake of about 400,000 individuals, only about 50,000 of them are actually drafted into the IRGC portion. And so the concern is, those 50,000 individuals who are drafted into that portion, what happens to them and how do we differentiate?
They were unwittingly made part of the IRGC.
Exactly. And so I think that's been one of the points that, the Canadian government has argued for a long time. They've said, well, we don't want to make it so that those individuals are wrongly accused or whatever the case may be. And so I'm curious to see how they're actually going to deal with this now that the IRGC is in fact put onto the terrorist list.
I just don't know why that's so hard to do. I know it's been an issue, but I don't know why it's so hard to carve that out, to make sure those people are not victimized by this new law or not considered terrorists, in other words, right? I don't know why, and that's the argument that many people like Nico Hang, others who have come on the show, Reza Moridi, have said, no, we can deal with this. It's okay. We can make sure those people are okay.
I think in the grand scheme of things, it's worth it to have the IRGC on the terrorist list and to deal with this number, whether it's 50,000 or whatever, in a separate way. But I think there's also the concern that of those 50,000, there's all sorts of things happening. I read another statistic actually that of those 50,000, 20% of individuals actually end up almost getting brainwashed. And so that's also a mechanism that they're using to keep the IRGC.
Yeah, but it's not good enough to not put the IRGC on the terrorist list.
Absolutely, I agree.
It's not good enough. And this is a necessary step. And frankly, it comes so late that some people argue the damage is already done.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's been such an infiltration in Canada. As I'll bring this up with Ardeshir, but, this country has been called a safe haven.
For sure.
Jokingly, in dark humor-wise. Yeah. This is where, and you in some cases, you actually see it on the streets of Toronto. You go, that person.
Not so sure.
Yeah.
I'm actually, now that we're having this conversation and the fact that the compulsory military service has always been an issue, I think more than ever now what's an issue is how are you going to identify and deal with that infiltration in Canada? Forget about the 50,000 people who might have mistakenly be put under the IRGC label because they were mandatory military service. But what about the people here? How are you going to go about identifying them? How are you going to be looking at all the financial implications of this over the years and the immigration?
Well, that's really important. That has to be done.
Yes.
That shall be done. Let's bring Ardeshir in here. Actually, because we're in our temporary studio, we're going to do a little swapperoonie. You're going to leave. He's going to come in because our space is quite intimate here. And so thank you, Pegah.
Thank you.
See you in a bit. We're going to get Ali Hamedani on the line from London for a feature interview in just a little bit. But first, Ardeshir Zarehzadeh or Zarehzadeh coming up in just a moment. We are coming to you on roqemedia.com. It is there that you can link to all of our platforms. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, and CastBox. If you like to see some visuals with Roqe, switch over to YouTube right now. And if you like your Roqe descriptions and bulletins in English and in Persian, check us out on Telegram to support what we're doing here at Roqe. You can go to that website, roqemedia.com, and press the support us button. You can either give us a One-time donation, become a sponsor, or become a subscriber on Patreon. Just press that support us button and it'll lead you to the links. We appreciate those of you who have been supporting us week after week. roqemedia.com is the site. Well, as we have been saying for Iranian Canadians, if not Iranians everywhere around the world, the big news is that the Canadian government finally put the IRGC on the terrorist list. My guest here in studio now is someone who has been quite instrumental in calling for this action for many years. He is an Iranian-Canadian human rights advocate, a legal expert, and a familiar voice and face within the Iranian diaspora community here in Canada. Ardeshir Zarehzadeh is a lawyer who specializes in immigration and refugee law, as well as human rights tribunal cases. He is the director of the ICHR Canada, that's the International Centre for Human Rights in Canada. And in recent years, Ardeshir has been a prominent voice in advocating for the families of Flight PS 752. He's also been a leading advocate in the campaign to list the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. And right now, Ardeshir Zarehzadeh joins me in the Roqe studio. Hello, sir.
Hello. Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you on the program. I hope I said your last name correctly.
Yes, Zarehzadeh.
Not so bad. How it must have been an interesting 24 hours for you, because you've been so involved in this subject for so long. How did you greet the news that the IRGC is finally being put on the terrorist list in Canada?
Well, I have one of those days that I can't even describe. When I heard from CBC, because the news first leaked to CBC, it wasn't official. I was in doubt to believe or not, because every time we approached officials, talk about the listing IRGC in the past few years, they always try to justify why it's not a good idea to list IRGC. So
right.
It was like, well, it's CBC, and they have connection with government, so it probably is right. So I tried to do my own due diligence, and I learned, yes, through the families, they received news from Foreign Affairs that, they're listing IRGC, and I was really...
The Foreign Affairs...
Canada
contacted PS 752 families?
Yeah, at the same time, yeah. And it was an amazing day. I couldn't sleep last night.
Really? So you greeted this in a celebratory way?
Yes, I was really happy.
I see.
Yeah.
And if you can, I mean, this is something you've been calling for a long time. If you can remind us, because we've been through this in Canada for so long, and also in Britain and the European Union and places like Australia, why, I think I know the answer because I've done essays about this, etc. But to remind us, why is it important for the IRGC to be placed on the terrorist list in countries around the world?
Well, IRGC has influence in Canada, and the politicians already saying this for a long time, that they freely operate, do business in Canada. And we know that the IRGC is in charge of the entire country in Iran, and they are the real government, not the government of Islamic Republic. The real government in Iran is the IRGC. They have branches in charge of economy, politics, security, military, everything, you know. And after years of studying IRGC and their operations in foreign countries, countries like United States decided to list the IRGC as a terrorist group. But Canada had no understanding of importance of listing IRGC at that time. So we briefed them. We went to Ottawa. We met so many officials in the past few years, liberals, conservatives, NDP members.
And you started this way back with the Harper government.
Yes, Harper government.
Did, along the way, I mean, along those 15 years, however long it's been since back to the Green movements, et cetera, did you think you were getting any closer, or was there always a resistance for one reason or another to making this happen?
Well, there were resistance, honestly. At the first, I was really disappointed, but I said, impossible is nothing, as Muhammad Ali said, my favorite late boxer. Impossible is nothing, and I will keep fighting. And we did. I remembered back then, diplomats in foreign affairs, Gulf affairs. We don't have like Iran section officially, but we have Gulf. And they were saying, "Oh, we are watching. We know we have meetings with CSIS. Those officials in charge in RCMP, CSIS. So they are watching. We are aware of what's going on." And I kept saying, "You don't know. You don't know the nature of those mullahs and the IRGC commanders. You have no study. Your knowledge is limited." And you don't know.
And in the absence of any kind of law, what kinds of Islamic Republic connected actors have we been seeing roaming around freely in the cities of Canada, like Toronto? I mean, this has been talked about a lot, especially with the massive influx of migration of Iranians just in the last 5 years, last decade. Without that kind of law, without the IRGC on the terrorist list, what has that enabled the IRGC to do?
Well, you had another question. The answer is still outstanding. But let me tell you something. We already have laws in place. Immigration and Refugee Act already says those who involved in crimes against humanity, those who are human rights abusers, those involved at top levels of a dictatorship government, they are inadmissible to Canada. But we don't have strong background check in place to check those officials. They are using different titles and they are putting fake documents to get visa and come to Canada. Easy, no one goes after them. That's why we hear at this point over 1,000 people were already called to inadmissible hearings. And the Canada Border Service Agency going after them. Why? Because they just recently, under the pressure of Iranian-Canadian community and the conservatives' pressure in the House, trying to go after them. And the Prime Minister already promised we are not going to let them enjoy Canada anymore. Canada is not going to be their safe haven anymore. So they're going after them. But my point is, they would do this like 10 years ago, 6 years ago. Why now?
Right.
So we had laws in place. And we had the Quds Force as a listed entity, terrorist group. But they never went after agents of the Islamic Republic who affiliated with Quds Force. All IRGC members outside Canada are somehow affiliated with Quds Force.
And that's the part that seems like a no-brainer. That's the part where no one can figure this out, and it feels suspicious when we say, why did it take so long? I mean, it was 3 years ago that I had Dr. Reza Moridi, who was, of course, formerly an MPP with the Liberal Party, sitting in the studio, and I said, you know your fellow Liberals, or you're the why are they not taking this action to put the IRGC on the terrorist list?
Yeah,
and he kept saying, I don't know. Why has this been such a mystery?
Yeah, he wasn't happy too. He wasn't happy either, because he always tried to convince them to support the community's demands. They kept refusing them.
And so what, and I understand that we have to, nothing comes overnight. And when action, I saw Hamid Ismailioun making the statement of, this is a big step. And after so many people like yourself and him and others fighting for this, then it is something we should take a moment to celebrate.
Yes.
But at the same time, I can't help but think when Trudeau was walking on the protests with Zandagi Azadi, and when everybody has been paying lip service to, we're going to oppose this regime, etc., why has this taken this long? I mean, the killing of Masa Amini, if that was a precipitant, was now 2 years ago almost.
Yeah.
What do you suspect has been the problem? You're exhausted by that question.
No, honestly, it's a good point you're mentioning. It's something that is. I'm looking for that answer too, honestly. Let me tell you something. An agent of the Islamic regime came to my office without appointment, just showed up in my office and tried to talk to me. I reported him to FBI and RCMP. And FBI in just couple of hours said that this guy is a high-profile operative of the Islamic regime and came to Canada for a reason. He's on mission, FBI. And I'm saying this publicly because I have evidence. It's already out there. Authorities are aware of that. But it's a question, what was the RCMP's response? Well, first they said, well, don't worry, we're going to take care of it. And after a few days, they blocked me. No more answer from our RCMP. I had to know where this guy is, right? But FBI said, you are at risk, okay? We're talking about 2018 and 19.
There's that much difference between the way the Americans and the Canadian governments deal with this?
Yeah, and imagine during the movement after the death of Mahsa Amini, how many threats we received. Yes. Families of PS752, yes. Iranian-Canadian activists, those who were organizing protests, even myself. What the RCMP did in response, just some interviews with some of them, and that's it.
Well, it's become a bit of a sick joke, that people, that the Iranian community tells to each other in Canada about this being a safe haven for, if you're a member of that murderous regime and you want to go somewhere and you'll be fine, come to Canada, right? Despite the things that government officials have been saying. That's why it's been this mystery of, there's people who argue that it's about money, that, there's some money involved. And so, that big donors, they don't want to piss off some big donors. I don't know what it is, but I am curious why you think this happened now. I see some people taking credit for it. I know your friend Pierre Poilievre, the conservatives are saying, well, this was because of all the pressure we put on. But why do you think this happened on a seemingly random day in June of 2024?
Well, everybody deserves credit, honestly. Everybody did a great job on this, and I even believe that there were liberals who believe this IRGC is a terrorist entity, and they pushed from inside, And I guess the government came to the understanding that IRGC is really a big threat to Canada's safety and security. Especially in the past few days, they're expanding their operations internationally. So back then, as I said, there was little understanding. But now they realized, IRGC is in charge of the country and foreign operations, and also control the money and funds, IRGC. So it's a huge threat to Canada. And as you mentioned, there's money involved, and the businesses involved with Canada are IRGC backed. And as you know, I'm sure you know, IRGC's businesses mostly are indirect business. They are registered under different names, entities and individuals, but they are all linked to IRGC. And that's a problem in Canada we have, that officials don't want to go after them, because they need a staff, they need money, funds to support that project, and they don't want to do that.
So this is a big step. Yeah. That said, there are a lot of people, this won't surprise you. I mean, I posted a little video about this, asking questions about it yesterday, and you can go through my timeline. I mean, I know you can just go check Twitter or whatever yourself you want. You will see a lot of Iranian Canadians very skeptical of this. A lot of people worried that this is just a symbolic step. We're less than a week removed from Hamid Nouri, who the Swedish government had finally we got this guy, a criminal, who's detained by the Swedish government, and then they release him to the Islamic Republic. So people feel like, okay, well, what will this actually mean? And I'm guessing the next step is that this has to be enforced. So what is the next step for you as somebody who advocates on these issues?
Well, you answered yourself. We have to be hopeful for the enforcement part. We will wait for the government to enforce it. We already have lists. We have names, evidence that IRGC operates in Canada. There are other people gathering names, doing investigation, because, well, we couldn't wait for government. We kept saying that we are doing your job for you. Here is the list, right? So we have all the resources in place to push the government and get reactions, see if they are really serious to enforce the law or not. Even though if the government doesn't want to enforce it, we have it in the law, okay? We can go after IRGC in Canada because it's our law. It's in criminal code. We already have court decisions in the past few years that the court recognized IRGC as a terrorist entity. We have Immigration and Protection Act that makes those officials inadmissible to Canada. We have Magnitsky Act law that sanctions those officials involved in human rights abuses, you know. So we have all the resources to go after them. Obviously, this is going to be a big consequence for the Islamic Republic, not only IRGC members, and it really makes me feel happy as someone who were in jail and solitary confinement in IRGC detention centers in Iran for a number of time. And, we keep fighting. We are very hopeful.
Just put, I think Hamas is on the terrorist list in Canada, and we don't know if that's always enforced.
You are making me lose hope.
It's a good example of where you kind of go, well, I'm not sure that this always gets enforced. That's
a good point, honestly. Well, we know that the country is approaching next election, and the Liberal government doesn't want to lose the votes of Iranian Canadians. Obviously, they're doing
and I think there's been a migration of votes based on, that they have been losing votes. So maybe this will change things. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's a great pleasure to have you come in and talk about this. Thanks for doing this. Just before you go, so we started with how's the last 24 hours been for you? Can you just reflect on the most interesting interaction you've had, or I'm sure you've heard from people, you've reached out to people who've been working alongside you on this for many years. Can you share some interesting reaction that you've received or heard since the government came out with this edict?
Well, I talked to many activists, those who were in jail in Iran, those lost family members, and everyone was happy. So I thought it was a big achievement for every one of us and all Iranian Canadians. It was a really happy moment when I heard afterwards. As I said, I couldn't sleep last night. I was just thinking about this and how we can go after them since it's already passed into law. We are all happy.
I appreciate this. I appreciate that the mild-mannered lawyer couldn't sleep last night like a schoolboy with excitement at this. So clearly it is a big deal for some folks.
Please keep this alive, because this topic is very important, that we keep ourselves in Canada safe and Canadians safe.
Do you think this will tip the hat, make a difference to the European Union or Britain or other places, or Australia?
For sure. The Commonwealth will, get influence from each other, and this is a huge discussion in Europe, Australia, and doing this in Canada after 15 years of pressuring government. It's like a dialogue, it's a dialogue going on for many years. So it's not a one-night decision, right? And there's a reason that the government made this decision. So, and they know the consequences. We don't have time to discuss that, but they know that. So I guess a number of countries will do the same.
Ardeshir, thanks for this.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
This is Roqe episode 327. All right, let's get to our feature guest waiting on the line from London. My feature guest today is an Iranian-British journalist, broadcaster, and activist. Ali Hamedani made history as the first Iranian gay journalist to report on the LGBTQI community and underground life in Iran for an international media platform, that would be the BBC. Ali was born and raised in Tehran in the middle of the Iran-Iraq War. He started reporting for BBC Persian from inside Iran at a young age, which resulted in his arrest by the Ministry of Intelligence in 2007, forcing him eventually to leave Iran and make London his new home. Ali's contributions to the BBC have been significant and diverse. His roles as a presenter, a reporter, producer, mentor have extended across various BBC platforms, including BBC World Service Radio, BBC World News TV, and BBC Two's Newsnight, as well as, of course, BBC Persian. Beyond journalism, Ali is deeply committed to nurturing the next generation of media professionals, training and mentoring hundreds of aspiring journalists, especially inside Iran and Afghanistan. And right now, Ali Hamedani joins me from London, UK. Hello, sir.
Thank you so much, and please, come on, I'm not a sir, call me Ali.
Hello, Sir Ali.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you on the program. I've been following you for a long time, and I wish I could be there in my old hometown of London with you or have you here in Toronto, but it's nice to be doing this remotely in the meantime.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ali, there's sort of breaking news, which is that, if I have this correct, tell me if I'm wrong, after many years, I think about 17 years at BBC, you have left BBC, or you're leaving BBC, and you have a plumb new gig coming up. Is that true?
It is true. You see, the BBC was my first ever job. I was 21 when I joined the BBC, as you said in the introduction, from inside the country. So I thought, okay, 17 years of being with one organization, and I love the BBC, could not be that healthy, and I really want to see the outside world. So I decided to move on. It was a very difficult decision. I always said that, and I will keep saying it. The BBC was my home, was my university. The BBC gave me two wings to fly. Initially on shortwave radio, the BBC trained me as a journalist, offline and online. When I say offline, I'm referring to the time that I was listening to the BBC as a young person on radio devices. And then they gave me this huge opportunity to report as a very young person. So, but a next chapter of my life is going to start, and I'm really happy about it. I'm gonna announce it as it happens. But meanwhile, I started doing some bits and pieces as here in London. I keep hearing it from it's a very English expression. Bits and pieces.
Yes.
But yeah, but
wait,
yeah,
you can't announce the new network? Oh. Okay.
The new network, I will tell you after the interview, but that's not a problem.
I see. Okay.
But what I'm doing meanwhile, it gave me a short break to actually finish the projects that I wanted to finish, including a series of podcasts, because I have done many interviews and I have never broadcast them.
Yes.
So I really wanted to make sure that I leave them somewhere for people. Many of the interviews are not even alive anymore. You see, I interviewed Rozan Montazami, the famous Iranian chef and author. She wrote the most published book. It was a cooking book, of course. So you see, I met her when I was 20 in Iran. So all of these interviews, I was storing them somewhere. So I opened that box and I started.
But they're with the BBC?
My initial years with the BBC, I was freelancing from inside Iran. So
you still have the rights to them. I see.
Oh yeah, they are mine. And of course, as a curious person, as a journalist, you always can do things for your own shelf. So that's what I was doing. I kept recording. I keep recording, and I find peace in radio. Although I spent the biggest chunk of my career doing television, but I find peace in radio.
Let me get to that. I'm going to get to that. See, you're such a broadcaster. I've seen some interviews with you where the person just puts you on and you go, which is wonderful. But I have questions I want to ask you. So we'll get to the radio piece. I definitely want to ask you about that. First of all, congratulations on leaving the BBC. And the reason I say that is, as heralded and as wonderful as the BBC can be, public broadcasters, or in some cases people would call it a state broadcaster. There's people who really want that gig, get it, and just stay there forever because it's the mothership and it's the womb and it's safety and it's really, you know. And having worked at a public broadcaster for many years, I've seen that, and so I'm always very impressed when someone is willing to leave and go out there and try other things, because once you're in the door, you know, a lot of people would sort of whisper to you, don't ever leave the BBC. It's a plum gig, you know. So first of all, good for you. And is it scary a little bit to be going?
Yeah. Let me tell you something. The BBC, the CBC, your public broadcaster there in Canada, are like our parents' houses. It is scary to leave them. Of course it is. But at some point, it is healthy to leave them.
Yes.
You may go back, you may visit, you may do something else and go back. But I think it is healthy to leave, to find yourself. And Jian, it is really interesting. The first few days when I was dealing with identity crisis, because the first microphone that I saw in my life was a BBC microphone.
Right.
And I was not sure. Okay, so now you're out of that organization that you adore and you want to start your own thing. You want to be your own agent. But what is that? And it took me a while to actually find myself. I'm still trying to explore.
Been there,
and I'm
yeah.
still trying to see what I'm going to do. Sometimes the editorial guidelines are so much integrated in our own identity that it is difficult to actually remember, okay, that was a guideline, a book for that organization. You can have your own life without
Yes. That's not easy to undo. I still catch myself doing things and I go, why the fuck am I doing this like CBC type thing? Because because you get ingrained into that. And also for 17 years, you've been the BBC's Ali Hamedani, and now you're just Ali Hamedani. So it is something but I think
tell
it's
this
so
to Instagram, because you see, I'm still struggling. Instagram doesn't want to remove the BBC from my handle, and I'm like, I left that organization. Can you please remove the 3 letters from my handle? It is difficult to convince Instagram that I'm not BBC Ali Hamedani anymore.
Well, let me ask you something else about your identity, though, as well, which is that I introduced you as openly gay, and I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that if it wasn't in your bio, on your website, etc. But I was thinking about you, and I was thinking, I mean, you've been so laudably open and brave in telling your story of being gay, the reality of being a member of the LGBT community in Iran, first of all, and then your life as an openly gay broadcaster. And I want to ask you about that story, but I also think, do you get tired of having to talk about that? Is that something that you somehow feel is like, oh, this is mandatory, I have to tell the story, and or do you still see the value in sharing that story, and even in an interview like this?
I will keep telling this story, and I will keep talking about it until the day that everyone finds this question boring. We are not there yet. We are not there yet. We are not there yet. I will tell you my life story, and I think that will tell you why. And I'm 38, soon 39, and I cannot believe at this stage, at this age, we are still dealing with so much homophobia, not only inside the country, which is our homeland.
But you understand what I'm saying. It shouldn't only be your responsibility. I'm always sensitive about bringing on somebody who happens to be black and making them responsible for telling the story of the black struggle, or something. But I do very much appreciate what you do, because frankly, it isn't done very much, especially in the Iranian community, and you're kind of an outlier of being, obviously we have a lot of gay folks in our community, but to be open about it and to be open as a broadcaster about it is rare and brave, and so thank you for letting us
thank you, Jian.
Talk
and
about
something else, I'm sure we had other gay LGBT journalists before in the history at the moment, and they are openly doing their jobs. But I think what I found significant in my life story and in my own life history is I started my job as an openly gay journalist for an international broadcaster from inside Iran.
Mm.
And ironically, the very being gay found me a job. Let's put it that way, and I will tell you the story because it is actually a funny story, and I'm always thankful to the person who made it happen. But I think I went on air with a report from an underground gay party in Tehran.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I started my career, and I think it is important to talk about it. And now I really feel like that I'm in debt um, um, uh, to the society that I'm coming from. I owe them because I am living a free life. I had the honor to be a journalist for one of the most prestigious media organizations on earth.
Mm.
And I think the only thing that I can do is to talk about this very issue alongside of other things. And
Well,
that's why when I started my career, I tried to do other stuff, including politics, including art, including music, including cultural stuff,
mm,
because I didn't want to be too focused. I wanted people to know me as Ali Hamedani, who does some
yes,
interesting content here and there.
yes.
So that became the sugar coat for the content that I always wanted
Well,
to tell.
as a way of getting into your story, let me read your words back to you.
Okay.
You did a post not too long ago about Mohammad Khordadian. It's just in December, saying he was an Iranian openly gay icon who expressed things for years that so many were afraid to say. And you wrote something interesting in the post. You said, I want to quote you. You said, it's possible to be an influential Iranian, yet always question why you were born in Iran. Tell me what that means to you.
You see, many people call him by his first name, Mehmet Jun, but I call him Aghay Khordadian or Mr. Khordadian, although he's a close friend, because I think it is very important to stick his gender, being male, to his name, his family name, because he's a gay man. For your non-Iranian listeners, he is an iconic Iranian dancer who started his career as a dancer and as a choreographer and as a teacher out of Iran in Los Angeles. Our generation learned how to perform Persian dance by watching the pirate videos that he was producing in Los Angeles. And smugglers used to smuggle them back to Iran because dance is banned in Iran, of course.
Of course.
And for a man, it is a taboo to dance in our culture, or it was. I even cannot imagine how he started his career. I even cannot imagine
Mm.
the bravery. Imagine you are in Los Angeles among all of those exiled singers coming from Iran, and I love them all. But our culture is not the most LGBT friendly culture. It has not been like that.
Right,
Yes, we are
right.
getting there. I hope one day soon. But he managed to go negotiate and say, "Hey, in this very exiled business that you are owning, can I also contribute?" And he started dancing. And the reason that I call him Aghay Khordadian or Mr. Khordadian is all of those rumors. Is he a man or a woman? Oh my God, he's Eva Khahar, the word I translated awkward sister.
Hmm.
It's a very, very, very rude word that basically equivalent to that very homophobic F word.
Yeah.
And I keep saying it to him, Mr. Khordadian, first of all, to respect him, and second, to say, a master can dance, a master can be gay, and a master can become famous, and a master can become influential, and a master could be popular, and a master can be your master gay can be your teacher and teach you something and leave a legacy behind,
Yes.
and you always remember him. And yes, recently a documentary featuring him was aired, and he talked about his life story. He talked about his romance, and that story is very heartbreaking, and how difficult it was and it is to be a gay man from Iran.
Yeah.
And yes, that's why I say you can be an influential Iranian, but still question why I was born in Iran. It is not easy, Jianjan.
But I mean, you are in that quote describing Khordadian, but you could also be describing yourself. You are now an influential Iranian who is well known. And I'm guessing there have been days, if not a few of them, that you question why the lottery had you born in Iran. Would that be true?
It's true. Yeah. You see, I was born in May 1985, and it was at the height of Iran and Iraq war. I was born in Tehran, the capital, and post-revolutionary Iran was not fun at all. Iran came out of a colorful, full of music, fun, Western culture and society to a country which was led by an Ayatollah. It was going through a horrible war between Iran and Iraq. And I remember the very first picture that I remember is that very brown television screen, because it was always showing the war front lines, and it was always dusty. And nothing. Jian, one of the reasons that I love radio is because my very first memory of life is actually from a radio broadcast. For your non-Iranian listeners, so revolutionary Iranian state radio and TV didn't have any music. Even the word music, musiri, was
Yeah.
banned. They turned it to something else. Do you remember what that was? Sorud, which means anthem. But music.
Yeah.
I mean, so no music. We were living on our parents' cassettes, pirate cassettes from pre-revolutionary
Yeah.
Iran, which was also banned to
Yeah.
have them.
Smuggling the Pink Floyd, yeah.
Yeah, or copying it.
Right.
So one of the first memory of life that I have is my father was listening to international broadcasters like the BBC, Voice of America, Voice of Israel, which were broadcasting in Farsi to Iran. But there was one other station which was also very popular, not because of the content, but because of music, and it was Radio Baghdad,
The
coming
Iraq.
from
Right.
Radio Iraq,
Yeah.
coming from Saddam's Iraq. So it was a propaganda station trying to brainwash people. So to be able to do that, they were broadcasting loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of musics, loads of musics. And if the BBC or Voice of America and Sedai Israel, Voice of Israel, had half an hour or 45 minutes of shows, Radio Baghdad was on air for 5 hours every day,
Yeah.
every evening. And evenings in Iranian in that time during the Iran and Iraq war, usually we didn't have electricity. It was loads of power shortage and power outage, basically. So we were living on a radio working on batteries. And of course, my parents wanted to feel that very, very boring, dark evenings. And my father was trying very hard to actually, I have the radio here, believe me or not. This is one of the things
Wow.
that I actually took out of the country because I owe my knowledge, international knowledge, to this radio, which is right next to me. So my father was trying very hard to point this antenna to somewhere which could basically bypass the Iranian regime's jammings to be able to listen to Radio Baghdad. And I remember vaguely, I think I was 3, that the Radio Baghdad was broadcasting a song by Gugush, the most famous Iranian pop singer. And I even remember the song Man Amadam, which is an Afghan tune. And all of a sudden, the music went off, boom, and the very angry anchor came on air, shouting, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim,
Right.
Baghdad calling. This is an announcement by His Excellency President Saddam Hussein. In a few minutes, an airstrike is going to start. If you are living in Tehran next to any military base, please leave home now. And we didn't know whether that was a truthful statement, was that a propaganda mechanism to basically pour people out of their houses. But what I remember is the mood shift from Man Omadam song, which is a happy song by Gugush, who was also missing in those years, to screams and shouts and trying to gather yourself.
By the way, you're
now.
very young at this point, right? Because you're
True.
born in 85. Yeah, because the war ends in 89 when you're 4 years old. So this is right towards the last parts of the war.
And that's why I said this is my first memory of life. Because I remember that night.
Can I just make a couple of observations about that? One, because I know this story about how radio becomes a refuge for you, not just from what's happening in Iran, but we'll get into it, your story of what's happening at school later, etc. Radio becomes your sanctuary, your refuge. And I as somebody who did radio for many years and who also loves radio, feel like a brother in terms of your love for radio. But two observations. One, as a product of what was happening in Iran at that time, and not to take anything away from the Iran of today, and yes, it's very technologically advanced now and modern, etc., and it certainly was in the 70s, but in that pocket of the 80s and 90s, Iran becomes what the West was a few decades earlier. Like in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, radio was the lifeline. People are gathered around to listen to radio. So you're experiencing something that generations before in the West had experienced. But the second part of that is the ongoing not just utility, but profound power of radio, of audio, right? It's this, the way it affects you, I believe. It's a very intimate medium. It's going right into your ears. It's not like so I remember doing years of radio and then years of television, and people, when you're on TV, they think you're a star. They treat you like you're a celebrity. Not so in radio necessarily, but in radio, they think you're their close friend. They think of you as family. There's something intimate there, and so they feel this connection with you. And whereas on TV, they're distracted by why is he wearing that, or what's up with his hair, or whatever, and so that ongoing mystical, magical quality of radio is what you were experiencing, and it's so important to me as part of the story, and I'm guessing that's part of why you also wanted to go into broadcasting, right?
Exactly. The lesson that I learned the very first day that I sat in front of a microphone to read the news, basically present a news show, I remember that very angry presenter, and I said, even if you're giving a bad, dark news, smile.
I love that you, by the way, I'm sorry to cut you. This is something you've said, and I loved it. I watched you on with King Ram. You said this. You said news, being a news anchor, is usually bad news. Because there's no point. Nobody reports the good. If it's a sunny day, you don't report it. If there's a hurricane, you report it. Right?
You report sunny days in London.
Right. But I mean, and so you say that because your job becomes to deliver negativity, essentially, you've learned to do it in a softer way. I don't know what that means. What do you mean by that? That you kind of try and temper it?
Reflect with your listeners. I used to present a morning show for 8-9 years. And when I started that show, many people didn't trust me in the team. They were like, this guy who used to be a music presenter is coming here to basically turn this very serious news program to something flaky. And I was like, no. When you listen to all of these very serious BBC radio shows, CBC radio shows, NPR radio shows, when people want to start their days with you, listening to you, they want you to be their friends. No, I mean the show was going on at 2:30 a.m. London time, 7 o'clock Tehran time. So I was very sleepy. Many of us were very sleepy, but people were waking up
Yes.
to have a day, to start their days. And I was like, instead of saying good morning, dear listeners, which is very common in our culture, like Shravandagana Aziz, and instead of saying that, say, good morning. I hope you are starting your day. It is with some coffee or tea. It is sunny, and I can see Tehran is actually brighter than London, right? Okay, let's get to the news. And then the news was extremely negative. I mean, I cannot remember reporting on Iran and Afghanistan and the world over the past 2 decades, 1 decade, with some happy news. Even when we were giving happy news, there was some negativity in it.
Yeah.
So I think that news is already very negative. And I think, I mean, if you want to talk to your brother, if you want to talk to your sister, if you want to talk to your friends, if you want to talk to your parents about something very serious, all of a sudden you don't go and find your necktie and so yeah, I want to talk about something serious with you. No, I mean, but radio gives this opportunity to us, to all of us, to be our listeners' friends and make them feel that you are their friend. You are. It is really important. And I think one thing, because as you said in the introduction, I trained and I'm training many broadcasters, especially in Afghanistan. The only thing that I say to them, the very first thing that I tell them as broadcasters is when you want to sit in front of the radio microphone, always have a picture of someone that you love and you feel close and deliver the news. For me, that was my mom because she was my ultimate listener, WhatsApping me during the show. Don't say that. Do you think people will say this was an accurate, balanced, impartial? The tone was not right.
Right.
Always think someone who you love is listening. Or sometimes my partner was that person. I always wanted to impress the partner.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I was just
Yeah.
trying to have something when I was doing that. But you see, this closeness, friendship is key in radio, is key in any audio production, podcast.
But
And
also, isn't it? I mean, in terms of that difficult news, one of the negative stuff, one of the things that you're trying to impart, I think, as a broadcaster, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is something that you've part of what has been in your toolbox, but is also based on that wanting to be their friend, is you want to kind of reassure the audience. You're almost like an airline pilot and there's some turbulence. So the great anchors, the great broadcasters of history, when they're broadcasting shots are being fired or there's some horrible event happening, they're calm. They're the voice of calm. That's famously so. These anchors who sort of tell you what's going on without alarming you. And so part of it is the tone, right? Is just trying to bring people along without freaking them out. War of the Worlds, Orson Welles style.
exactly, and then there is a life beyond news as well. That is very important. I never forget one of these scenes that I saw in Afghanistan, and the person was listening to the BBC. It was morning. The Afghans are in love with the BBC, I have to say, and they always start their days with the BBC, listening to BBC dairy service. And I remember the guy was very poor. I think he was actually begging in the streets, but had one of these small FM radios, listening to the BBC, and he was listening to the news. And news doesn't have, I mean, a news bulletin doesn't have anything fun for such person. But I remember when the news finished, he basically folded the antenna, put the radio device in his pocket, and said, "Bismillah, let's start the day." So you see, there is a life beyond news, and I think the magic and our duty is how we are going to make this very darkness of politics, everyday life, current affair relevant to people's lives. And even during Iran and Iraq war, I remember that we were going to weddings. News was full of news bulletins were full of reports about wars and people getting killed. But at the end of the day, we also wanted to have some life, right? And whether you say that very horrible news in a very serious, I mean, seriousness is important, but manipulative way. Let's put it that way,
Yeah,
manipulative
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Whether you do it or not, the news is darkened, and people have that understanding, and we have to trust their knowledge, their understanding of the world, and instead of being um, their manipulator, we have to be their friends. Otherwise, they would not trust us.
Right, but this was a question that came up a bunch in the first months after the killing of Mahsa Amini, when um, albeit there was a lot of enthusiasm that Iranians around the world were uniting and there was a potential for regime change or whatever. There was horrible things happening in Iran, as they always do, but it was a heightened atmosphere, executions, kids being killed, this horrible. And if you remember, I know you remember because it was less than 2 years ago, but there were these conversations being had that people shouldn't be doing concerts. People shouldn't be, actors shouldn't be acting. This is a serious time. There's things happening, and it seemed on some level reasonable. Okay, when people are dying, you don't tell jokes at a funeral necessarily. But on the other hand, after a few weeks, and then it became months, it was like, if we're not celebrating our lives or telling jokes or dancing, then on some level the regime is winning, isn't it? Where were you in that conversation? How did you feel about all of that?
Yeah, first of all, two things. This regime, which is now ruling our country, enjoys concerts being canceled, enjoys joy being canceled. That is one thing. The second thing that I always say is we need to be more creative. We need to see how we can turn all of these events, gatherings, chats, radio and TV shows to a power generator
Mm.
to basically push what is going on the ground, inside and outside of the country. That is really important. Otherwise, I mean, we are humans. We are humans. And we need that power. If we are going to fight, we need that power. We do need that power. And one thing that I learned
What does it mean, though?
from
Turn the media into power generators. What does
yeah,
it actually?
sure. Yeah, like okay. So instead of just giving the news, or old-fashioned propaganda, shouting, "People, you now need to pour into streets and fight." Instead of that, I would say give the news. But what else can you do? Okay, why don't I get a psychiatrist to come on air and talk about how people can protect their mental health? Why don't I go and talk to an expert who can teach people how to use VPNs or how to deal with internet shutdown? So you see, it is really important that all of us see our capacities and try to do one thing,
Right.
and also try to keep our hopes. Hope. That is the key.
Yeah. That's very well said, I think, and you've done that, by the way. Bring on a psychiatrist, and I mean that these are work on the VPN stuff. Can I just take 3 steps back and get back to your story? And the radio becomes this refuge, but in and around this is it's quite a harrowing story. Your story, as it is for, obviously, I mean, people go through tremendous ups and downs in life, and certainly Iranians post-revolution and Iran-Iraq war, etc., but especially a young gay Iranian. And you get kicked out of school in the 1990s for being gay. You're only like 12 or 13 years old. The remarkable part of that, Ali, for me, learning about that story was actually that you were out at all. I mean, no one would blame a kid for staying in the closet in a repressive place like Iran. Tell me how and why you had the courage to come out as a kid.
I was forced to come out. That's how I was introduced to my sexual identity. But let me tell you the story. I remember I was 13. And of course, in Iran, Tehran, I was going to a very good school, I think. So in Iran, the education system used to be 5 years of primary school, 3 years of mid school, and then 4 years of high school. So I was on the third year in mid school, going to high school. It was very important to get the best marks at the very end of the year. The reason was that the final exams used to be national. So basically, every single student at that age used to sit down to 1 question to 10 questions, similar questions answered, because that's how the education system was ranking students to send them to different high schools. And there is a reason that I'm saying this. So, and as I said, I was born in May, right? I remember that day really well. For your non-Tehrani, non-Iranian listeners, um, Tehran is a dry city. Tehran springs are beautiful, but spring is not was not, at least, my favorite season. The reason was many people were enjoying their birthday parties in October or Christmas or March during Nowruz, but mine was very close to the final exams. So I never liked spring. And I remember that very May, like I think it was around for sure it was around my birthday. May, it was very dry, it was very hot. And I remember the school was in a very leafy, green neighborhood, but the leaves were very dry. Um, of course, I'm a journalist, so many people could imagine that I was in love with literature. And so the literature classes were my favorite, and the literature teacher was my favorite teacher
Even
as
by
well.
the age of 12, you're in love with literature.
I will tell you why. Actually, that has a story as well. Because I was very lonely, because I couldn't go to playground and play with people. And the reason is, I think at that age, I think around 11, that's when many people started calling me that disgusting word, "Evachohar," which I translated to an awkward sister. So I
Which is kind of
noticed
like
that
the F word.
F word. It's the F word. Yeah, that's the F word. Um, I remember I remember that many people in Iran, it is funny, right? Because classmates do not use their first names. They call each other by their family names. Hamedani, come here, huh? Or Gomeshi, where are you? That's how it is. But students, classmates used to call each other by their first names. But when it came to me, they used to call me that awkward sister. Where is this awkward sister? And I was like, why do they call me that? Am I nosy? Am I what is it? And I didn't know. I did not know. The only thing that I knew was there is something wrong. So, and I that made me very lonely. So that's how I was taking refuge in my room at home, not going out to play with other kids, reading books and listening to international radios at the age of 11, 12. Okay, let's go back to that May 1998. This literature teacher, it was at the very end of the year, as I said, it was spring. And he said, we need to talk. And I was like, oh my God, the literature teacher wants to talk to me. Um, I walked behind him. We walked out of the class. We walked out of the school. We went to the courtyard, and he put me in a corner and started this rant. It is not easy to remember, but I'm trying, and it is important to talk about it. So bear with me and my pace, please. He said, okay, Ali, I think you noticed that your classmates call you awkward sister. Do you know what that means? I was like, these classmates are rude. I don't know, but I think they are this is not a good manner. No, you are mentally disabled. And that was a shock. And the reason that was a shock to me was I grew with my mentally disabled aunt, who I love. And I had a Down syndrome sister who passed away when she was only one. So I grew up with people with disabilities. I
Right.
know them.
And you knew you were not that.
No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. I didn't know if I was or not at that point. I was like, what? Am I? I don't think so. He said, yes, you are. And you will. So that was the first seat. That's the second one. And you are not going to live long. You will die before you turn
Oh my
40.
God. This is like
Um,
unbelievable. Yeah. Okay.
and I was like, oh my God, that cannot be true. Why are you coming to school? Don't. Don't come to school. Don't. There's no point. You will not learn anything here. Go home, learn something else, babysitting. Do you want me to talk to your parents? I was like, no, 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 no. Please, please, please do not do that. But why do you want to come and do the final exams? There's no point in doing the exams. I was like, uh, let me do it, please, please let me do it. Let me finish it. Let me get what we call cycle or the diploma for that 3 years, and I will go and get lost. But please let me do it. Are you sure? Do you want me to talk to your parents? No, 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 please. I cannot remember whether I kissed his hand at the very end of this conversation. I cannot remember. But what I remember, and I still do, is the feeling, is the fact that I was begging someone
Yeah.
to let me continue my education. At that very moment, Jian John, my secret life had started. I started living a double life. Well, in Iran, we all live a double life because we have one life out of
Sure.
home, we have
Yeah.
one life with our parents. So I had this third life as a gay man. And I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, if you manage to finish this mid school, then you will go on to another high school. So this guy cannot find you. But the effect of that moment, um, which is still with me.
Oh, that the effect of that moment is, I mean, is worse than getting physically. I mean, you're basically how to recover from an authority figure, your teacher in literature, which you love, saying these things to you. Did you tell anybody about this, or you
I didn't dare who to. But
your
there was
parents?
another
No, I
effect.
guess it's
No,
not.
no, I didn't dare. The effect of that moment was for years, even until I got my PhD. I used to be a very fast reader and doing all of those, studying super fast, but I couldn't even finish one page per hour. One page, one page. I believed unconsciously that I was mentally disabled. But hey, I think one of the reasons that I became a journalist, one of the reasons that I became a vet, because I am a vet as well. One of the reasons that I became a vet, one of the reasons that I became a
A
journalist,
veterinarian. I should not a
yeah,
veteran, but yes, yeah.
is I wanted to show him that I'm not mentally disabled, so I became a doctor, and I wanted to be able to talk to him on television and radio. One of the reasons was that.
Wow.
Anyway, that was past,
Do we know where
and
this?
but
Do we
oh
know?
yeah, yeah,
We know where
yeah.
he is. We know he's still around. This guy.
I bumped into him in Istanbul a couple of years ago, and I
Well,
actually went to him, stopped him.
what do you mean you bumped
Very,
into him? Like literally, you bumped?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I was in Istiklal Street, the famous central
yeah.
street in Istanbul, and I was just walking, and I
And the
saw him.
teacher that traumatized you in Iran happened to be walking down the street in Istanbul at the same time.
Yeah, loads
What a
of tourists
story!
travel. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, do you remember me?" Of course you do. I just wanted to let you know that you consciously or unconsciously tried to destroy my life. But that effort basically was a failure because I am who I am.
What did he
The
say?
loneliness of that, no, he didn't say anything. He just passed. The loneliness of that moment in Iran is always with me. And I don't want that to happen to anyone, 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 anyone. I'm going back to your very first question. How do you feel about being introduced as an openly gay Iranian journalist? I do it because I want people who are inside Iran at that, if they are 13 or 14, I want them to see me and know that they are completely normal.
And they can become you, a successful broadcaster. The interesting thing about what happens with you is that, thankfully, and again, no one would blame you if you turtled and or even engaged in self-abuse or whatever after that. But you somehow use this incident, I guess, or being bullied in school, etc., as an impetus to go into, I mean, it's quite remarkable that this kid that's been bullied and has had this experience then becomes a broadcaster in Iran, underground, working furtively with the BBC and developing the first, podcasts of its kind in Persian. Where do you think that came from in you? The strength that you're saying you're lonely and your refuge would be your room. I mean, where does that kid find the...
Never lose hope. Never lose hope. I never lose hope. I manifest and I make things happen. I remember I grew up, as I said, I was very lonely. I was listening to radio, international radios. One of the programs that I was listening was a Friday show coming from BBC Persian Radio in London from a known Persian broadcaster, Behzad Bolur.
Yes.
Music, loads and loads and loads and loads of music. He was on your show, I remember.
Yes, of course.
And I remember that I was going back from high school to home and listening to him and the BBC and all of these international broadcasters, by the way, is not okay with the authorities. So I needed to keep my mouth shut, listening to all of these broadcasters. And I remember one day he used to present a show on Friday, Ruza Haftom, the seventh day. And I remember that I was going back home, Jian, from school, and I remember that I was mocking his show. I had my backpack walking from school, that little kid. Well, I had never been a little kid. I'm a giant elephant. I was walking home enjoy London, as this is London or London calling, you're listening to Ruza Haftom. And I remember that I was mocking him. And I was like, one day you will do it, one day you will do it, one day you will do it, one day you will do it. And there was no way to do that. I mean, when I say that, it's actually funny that one day, so high school finished, I went to university, as you said, to become the animal's best friend. I call myself. It was weblog era. It was early 2000, 2003, 2004. And I was like, weblog is not enough. I started writing blogs. I started talking about LGBT people on a blog. I was like, this is not enough. I should do a podcast. But the podcast couldn't be focused on the LGBT community because that was too much for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did, of course, in our university, we had too many fellow gay classmates. And we were friends, so I basically gathered a couple of them that I could trust, and we started this podcast, which I used to call Tehran FM.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the podcasts were not the norm 20 years ago. I mean, now they're everywhere. That you were quite on the front end of things by doing a podcast.
I think it was Hossein Darakhshan who was doing one from Canada.
Yeah.
In Farsi, I'm talking about. It was one by an Iranian news agency, which again, my very good friend and colleague now at the BBC, Sam Farzana, was doing it. It was a very cultural podcast because he's as nerdy as I am. And it was mine. And also the College Park University students. But anyway, mine had like 2-3 listeners. But one day I decided to write an email I said, when you want something, it will happen if you keep that hope. I wrote an email to the Ruza Haftom, the show on the BBC, to Behzad Bolur. Hi, Behzad, I hope you are well. I listened to your show since I was 9, and I actually started doing this podcast, but I love your show. It was my dream to actually do what you do. And I left my phone number. I don't know why. And it was my mom's mobile, not my phone, by the way. I didn't have a mobile phone. I only had the permission to carry that mobile phone when I was going to university.
Okay.
So, and in 10 minutes he called and he said, actually, you're talented. How old are you? I was like, "Hello." It is 2005. I am 20. So, okay, I'm gonna send you a recorder, one of these digital recorders, which I actually have somewhere here because these things are the things that matter to me the most. So I remember that he called me and he sent me, I said he's going to send me a recorder. He gave me his personal email and I started chatting with him. And then the recorder arrived and I was like, okay, he called me. Okay, so for this week's show, what are you going to do? And I was like, what the fuck? What should I do? Sorry, I should not use the F word.
Well, come on.
WTF. WTF. What should I do? I don't know. I don't know anyone. I'm not a journalist. He said, what do you do in life, like everyday life? I was like, Behzad, I am going to a gay party this weekend. And he was like, oh, interesting.
Right.
Do you want to report on that? And this is the year Ahmadinejad said that we don't have any.
I mean, there's no gays in Iran. Yeah.
Yeah, you see it.
Yeah.
I told you I'm a giant elephant. I'm not gay. So everything started like that. And the very first report that I did for the BBC was from inside Iran, was from an underground party in northern uptown Tehran. And I was talking, and I was not sure if people are going to trust me and talk to me. But as soon as I turned on the recorder, actually people were desperate to talk.
Yeah.
Desperate to talk. And they were funny. They didn't want to talk about miseries. They actually wanted to share that moments of joy.
But by the way, another reason why radio is a great medium is it, especially in a situation like Iran at that time, is that it can be anonymous, right? It's voices. It's not, you're not outing them in terms of showing their faces, etc. So that can be helpful. Why do you end up getting arrested in 2007? What happened?
2008. So
2008.
After that report, I started basically. There was a show Zigzag every Thursday evening, and Behzad used to call me Zigali. So he grabbed Zig from Zigzag and my name, and he created this Zigali thing. And he used to call me Zigali on air, and many people still call me Zigali, which is very weird. So that Zigali was doing loads of dodgy stuff. So I started interviewing underground Iranian singers, graffiti, all of these underground artists. And I was going to these weird parties to find them and interview them. And we know the Iranian regime doesn't like that, didn't, still don't, doesn't. And like many of these very popular, famous singers now, like Tatalu, like Touhi, like Hichgas, all of these underground singers, they did their
a very different version of Tatalu. I was watching your interview.
Oh yeah.
He's not the current Tatalu. Yeah.
The Tatalu that I know, not the Tatalu that I don't know.
Right.
He's a very controversial person at the moment, but he used to be a sweetheart. Now he could sound like a criminal. Very sexist. But it was different. So I started talking to these people, and they gave their first interviews to me. And back in time, internet was not as great as today. I mean, internet is in Iran is not it has never been great, but at that time it was very slow. The penetration was very, very, very low. So these singers used to get the original file of the interview from me, and they used to burn it on their CDs when they were copying their CDs for their friends and other people. So once I remembered that I was sitting in a taxi in Tehran, and taxis, we know, I mean, taxis in Iran is a concept, basically. It's like what we call Uber pool. So we share the taxi with too many people. It's not like you have the taxi for yourself. And the taxis are where you hear the latest music. Some taxi drivers actually sell musics.
Huh.
And that's where the political debates happen, right? So I remember that I was going back home from university and I was sitting in this taxi and I remember it was Tatalu that the taxi driver was listening to. And all of a sudden I heard my own voice. That was my own interview with Tatalu on that CD. So that's how, and the program became very, very, very popular for this reason, because that was the first time a mainstream media platforms international was actually focusing on underground lives of people, alternative lives of people in Iran. And that's how I got arrested. And the way that I was arrested was not an arrest. Actually, that was a shocking moment. But I remember when I saw the verdict, it was um, spying for the MI6 and trying to spread homosexuality to reduce the Muslim population.
The the verdict that you, by the way, you failed. The Muslim population is in the billions. The verdict meaning you were convicted.
That's a very good question because that was a fake document that they showed me when they arrested me to force me to confess.
Okay.
We already have this.
Did you end up doing jail time?
It's a long story.
Okay.
Short answer is yes, and this is the first time that I'm talking about it.
Okay.
Only very few people know. So I received a call from someone. Actually, I was coming home from doing an interview with Tatalu. Funny enough. It was a November evening. Tehran was not that cold, very windy, very dusty. I remember that. And I remember that I was driving home and I received a call from a number that I didn't know. The guy said he's a reporter working with a known filmmaker. He was faking the story and he wants to meet me in Hotel Hilton, basically in northern Tehran. And he invited me to meet him next day, 9 a.m. And I don't know why, but I was suspicious. I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I called my friend to come with me. We went together. And my friend, also gay, very close friend of mine, my very, very, very close friend and classmate, he said, okay, you sit down in my car. I will go and say, I'm Ali Hamedani. If the person is the person who he claimed, then you will come. If not, I will tell you. So basically, we created this code, Zudbia, come quickly. And if I say come quickly, you just run away. An hour passed and I was sitting in his car waiting. Nothing happened. And I remember that the parking of Hilton was full of cars and I was like, who are these people? Like Hilton, I mean, we don't have that many like international tourists.
Right.
And people coming from Shiraz and Isfahan and Tabriz, and I mean, they don't go to Hilton. They know better places. Hilton is very old. So I was just waiting there, thinking about so many things, trying to figure out what if. So I rang Ashkan, my friend. Ashkan Jan, so what happened to you? Where are you? I'm waiting here. Ali Jan, I'm eating breakfast with this guy. Can you please give me a couple of moments? I was about to use the F word. That was not our code. You were eating breakfast with someone? Yeah. He is gay. And I was like, is he dating someone? Has he found someone there? Where are you?
Right.
And then I was like, okay, another call. He'd said the same thing. Then he called me. Ali, drop all clothes. Come here. Now. Do not run away. Basically, poor him was trying to figure out if they are going to arrest me or not, if they are going to do something to me or not. And remember, Hilton is very close to the infamous Evin prison.
Right.
So when I arrived there, I saw a short guy with loads of facial hair holding Ashkan's hand, saying, Roqe Hamedani. So when we say you BBC people are spies, it's because of what you do. Look, who taught you to do what you did just now? I was like, what are you talking about, guy? Who are you? And then the conversation started. He was not the actual interrogator. He was just a soldier, a Basiji or someone, I don't know. Funny enough, Jian John, usually when you go to hotels, especially in the West, they have piano and music late in the evening. But at that time of the morning, it was 11. People were drinking their coffees. And a piano player was playing the famous song, Raftam ke Raftam, Gone Forever.
Right.
It was so identical.
Right. A metaphor for what was happening.
Jesus. And then he grabbed my hand, put me in the lift. We went upstairs to floor 14. The lift's door opened. We turned to the right, to the very end of the corridor, again to the right, room 1401. He knocked the door.
You're by yourself, or did your friend come with you?
No. The friend was forced out.
Okay.
And poor him was waiting for me in the
So
toilet.
now
for
at this
12
point,
hours.
you know that you're in shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I thought they were going to basically arrest me at that moment and put me in jail in Evin, but it took them a couple of more sessions. So the door was opened. A guy in a very yellow mustardy suit, which was weird, opened the door, no facial hair. Hello, Mr. Hamedani, how are you doing? Come in. This person is actually very famous. I read about him in books, actually. So, Jian, from that moment, that Zigali died forever. That character died. I changed. I was forced to change. The word enemy is very common, dujman, in the Iranian politic language, basically. The supreme leader keep calling everybody dushman, enemy. And I never thought I can become an enemy myself. It was like they put me in a box, closed the door. There was another door. The door was open. Another Ali came out who was their dushman, who was their enemy. I have always been their dushman. But in theory, I knew who these people were. But as soon as this happened to me, it was like a surgeon who passes all of these classes, and now this is the first time you're in the surgery theater to do an operation yourself. That was the experience. I changed forever.
And you said that you do end up spending time in jail.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It is very difficult for me to talk about it. I try, but bear with me because I want to be. So basically, the guy knew everything about me. Remember? I mean, of course he knew, right? Because I was broadcasting on air, and it was not very difficult because they were tapping our phones. And of course, we had a life, and of course, we were dating people, and of course, we were on dating websites, and we never thought they are going to find us. We never thought they are going to catch gay people. And I'm now going to address some of our friends, journalists, fellow journalists, who are saying, yes, homosexuality is punishable by death, but their regime doesn't do it. It's just in the book. No. They know where and how to use that against you. And that is the problem. Yes, homosexuality is punishable by death in Iran. Yes, the Iranian regime uses that against the community when it is needed. Necessarily, they do not execute, but they use it. They use the law to put maximum pressure on you. And that is the problem. And I think you know who I am talking about, and many of your listeners know. A few sessions of interrogations happened, and at the very first time he wanted to take me to jail, I said, begging situation, but interrogation after interrogation after interrogation after interrogation after interrogation, a break. And then, because they wanted to put pressure on BBC, the BBC was about to launch Persian television, and the Iranian government. I was working for the BBC inside Iran without any accreditation, and they didn't mind it because they thought, okay, shortwave radio doesn't do anything, right? but television was big, and the BBC was the first international. I mean, Voice of America was there, but the BBC,
Right.
we all know it's an
Changes the
international
game. Yeah.
broadcaster.
Yeah.
This, and it really did change the game when it launched its Persian television to Iran. They didn't want that, and they really, really tried very hard to stop that, and they couldn't. So the BBC went on air in January 2009, and so I got arrested in February 2009. And I didn't share this with many people, except the close friend that I just said, uh, and only two people um, after I left. And all kind of things happened to me. All kind of things. Please, please, one day I will talk about it. But when I say all kind of things, I'm choosing these words carefully. All kind of things happened to a gay spy who was not a spy, but very gay.
Yeah. I mean,
You see, one of the practices that I was doing, because I talked about hope, and I think I really have to say this, when you are in the darkest, darkest, darkest possible moment of your life, try to close your eyes. There's no science behind this. This is my experience. Close your eyes and try to picture a dream, a wish, and try to make it happen with your imagination. And I remember I was doing it when sitting in that cell. I traveled to London. Of course, listening to the BBC made me um, love the city, know the city really well. So I remember, and I traveled to London for work. And I remember when I was sitting in that cell, I used to draw on the floor. I used to draw Oxford Street. Okay, now you're walking. Now you're going up in the Regent Street. Okay, that is the BBC building. Okay, let's pick up a one hot chocolate signature with cream on top, with from Starbucks, with a sugar-free blueberry muffin. They don't do it anymore, sadly. And okay, now you take them, you go, and then okay, picture yourself present a show. Picture yourself doing this. Picture yourself having a life. Picture yourself having a house.
But Ali, you end up in London. In fact, the same year, right? You end up leaving to go to basically, you're exiled and you go to London. It's interesting. I can't remember where. I think maybe it's in your bio or something. You say you made the difficult decision to leave Iran, and on. I mean, on the face of it, one might say, well, why was that a difficult decision at this point? I mean, you clearly, in terms of the things you want to do, London would be a better place. So this is the reason why a lot of Iranians end up leaving, unfortunately, Iran, some of the top talent, and what part of it was a difficult decision?
I could have left before that. To be honest, I had this opportunity and I rejected my job offer in 2007, actually. I was an idiot. But I think the most difficult part, and the reason that I call this difficult, was when I was saying goodbye to not many, some of my friends. I couldn't talk about it with many people. And I was, to be honest, at that very moment, that I wanted to leave the country, I was not even sure that I can or not. When I was saying goodbye to people, I kept asking myself, am I going to see them again? Am I going to see them again? Am I going to see my bestie Ashkan? Am I going to see my parents? Am I going to see my brother? Am I going to see this gay guy that I know since I was 16? Am I going to see our home? Am I going to see the schools? Because I went to all of these places to basically say goodbye. That was difficult. That was difficult. And then, as soon as the airplane took off, I also never said this to anyone. This is the first time that I'm talking about it. Do you know when I passed the passport control, I was not Still, I was not sure. You know, you can pass the passport control, someone else can come and get you.
Sure. Still, yeah.
And I was flying out on Turkish Airlines. And I remember that I waited till the very last moment when they say last call, then I pass the passport control. Because the fact we know, when you have luggage, they will not leave without you. What I wanted to do was minimizing the possibility of the regime noticing that I'm leaving and then making a decision in the
What were
airport.
you saying? I'm just going on a holiday or something, or what were
Oh
you?
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a two-way ticket to Istanbul.
Right.
That the other leg to London it was a different leg. The logistic around it was very
Right.
difficult. And I cannot say who bought the ticket for me because that person is also known. Um, I will tell you, not now, because I'm not sure if she wants me to talk
It's
about it or
okay.
not.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember when I sat on my seat and I was like, am I going to see? Am I going to see Tehran? Am I going to see these people? Stay awake and watch everything. And as soon as the airplane took off, I fell asleep. And when I woke up, I was in Istanbul. And I never, ever, never, ever, never, ever, never, ever said till today, I miss Iran. I don't. I love Iran, but I don't miss Iran. And I saw all of those people that I wanted. I do
Wait a
love Iran.
second. What an interesting thing to say.
I don't miss Iran.
I
What should
love
I?
Iran, but I don't miss Iran.
You see, it is not important whether this is what I learned, and this is not me. This is Hadi Forsandi, the famous Iranian comedian. He said, "It doesn't matter if I go back to Iran or not. If I return to Iran, the most important thing is Iran should return to us.
Hmm.
مهم نیست ما به ایران برگردیم. مهم اینه که ایران به ما برگرده.
Hmm.
I don't miss Iran. I love Iran. I have my little Iran at home. Iran is in my heart. Iran is my language. Iran is my music. Iran is my culture.
ولی
But I don't
ایران
miss
به ما
Iran.
برگرده. The interesting part of that is you weren't even born before the Islamic Revolution. I mean, this is the only Iran you've known. You are an educated
No, that is,
man who
you know,
knows the past, but I mean, I'm always impressed when people who grew up in Iran born post revolution. Um,
no, there is a reason
it's
because
like
I think my parents were trying very hard to basically undo all of those brainwashing and
yeah,
propagandas. I
yeah,
remember that I was going from a school, from primary school, which was very close to the Contemporary Art Museum in Tehran. And I remember that we were passing it, and I remember my mom was whispering into my ear that, Ali, listen, I know they say Marbar this, Marbar that, death to this, death to that, but this Contemporary Art Museum was built by Queen Farah of Iran, and we actually keep Picasso, Da Vinci, uh, like arts pieces here.
yeah.
And that's how I started knowing, got to know Da Vinci. Or I remember that we were passing the Tehran Opera House, which was closed, Tala Rudaki at the time. And I remember that my mother used to say, was telling us, whispering, I used to come here to see ballet, the
But I
Nutcracker.
feel like that's a big part of what you do too now, or you've been doing in recent years. You seem to care about highlighting Iranian history. That's not going to be talked about on state TV in Iran at present. I mean, do you feel a responsibility? Say you did a doc about Reza Shah and his final days in Iran. I mean, tell me about the desire to want to do all of that.
We are living in the age of propaganda and fake news. And I don't want Iranians, young Iranians, to become like North Koreans. We were lucky that we were born. The revolution happened right after uh, Iran got access to telecommunications because of all of those amazing TV shows and radio shows and musics that NIRT, the National Radio and Television in Iran before the revolution, was doing. And we watched them all on pirate cassettes. And then our parents were basically talking about the past with us. We were so lucky. And North Koreans were not like that because North Koreans' doors, the Iron Curtain, basically got shut
Sure. Yeah.
more than 7 decades ago before the telecommunication revolution. But we are at the age of fake news at the moment. And I think this regime keeps repeating fake news, fake narratives. Um, and people will believe them,
Yeah.
will believe them in future, if not now, in future. Like all of these things which they said about the Shah's wealth, all of these things they said about who, like Baha'is. That, I mean, so that's why I really thought, first of all, minorities are very important to me. Then the cultural stuff is very important to me. Culture is everything, Jianja. You see, over the past centuries and decades, many foreigners invaded Iran. But what we did as Iranians, we confronted them with our culture. Ferdowsi wrote the entire Book of Kings using Persian words because he wanted to resist against infiltration and usage of Arabic language in Iran. When Mongolians attacked to Iran, they wanted to they burnt libraries. What we did, we countered them with our Nowruz, with Hafiz. When this regime happened to us, they banned Nowruz. They called music Khomeini. In his very first speeches after the Islamic Revolution, he said, "Musiqi heroin, music is like heroin."
Yeah.
Nowruz is something from Zoroastrian, we are Muslims, but we did it. Celebrating Nowruz is not something they like. Even they don't like the wording around.
Yeah.
The word Charshanbe Suri is not being used. The last Tuesday of the fire burning, the last Tuesday of the year, or the other one, Sizde Badar, the National Picnic Day, then the Day of Nature. Like, why? Because they don't like it. They are trying very hard to force their narrative on Iran. And I think that's why I think culture is important. That's why I do not like the song tracks, the songs many of these young singers inside Iran are producing now, because they sound like Nohe, like all of those religious songs. It is on this rhythm, right? That's why when I had the music program, I kept broadcasting things that I thought people should know. And I'm not one of those people. No, music should be classy. No, I mean, I love Kuche Bazari. I love Susan and Agassi and Gugush and Haide. And yeah, call me cheesy. That's not a problem. Because when you didn't know what underground music was, I was empowering those underground singers. So now I decide to be cheesy because I think cheesy is how you are titling our national rhythm. What happened to our Taro Tombak? What happened to all of those Musiqi Zarbi? What happened to all of those Baba Karam dances? All of them are gone. All of them are gone. During the Shah, Tala Rudaki Tehran Opera House. This is a funny story, actually. They recruited an English ballet dancer, Robert Duvaren, to travel to Iran, go village by village to note down and choreograph Iranian folkloric dances, and then he taught the opera house ballerines how to dance Iranian. An English guy taught our dancers how to do it, because they look at Raqs Mahalli as something low down.
Yes.
But an English guy found it interesting, so he taught them.
Yes.
And then Iranian national television started showing them nationally. So that's how people in Tabriz know what Rashti dance looks like. That is how I know in Tehran what Sakine Daighazi is. How to dance Azeri, lesbian.
But also, I think it's important to note that, I mean, you're making a very important case about how much culture, popular culture, Iranian culture, even to the extent of Nowruz, etc., have been endangered by this regime over the last 45 years. At the same time, you can really make a case of how so much of that culture has sustained. It's not true that Baba Karam is gone. Baba Karam is like living on, right? I mean, that's the point.
True, it's the original thing. The
Yes.
original thing that they were trying to restore. Like we had this very interesting TV show, Murshedare, which was actually based on the Qachar dynasty dances. And they made it, and I mean, Pahlavi dynasty didn't like Qachar dynasty, but they didn't ruin the culture from them. But
Right,
this
right,
current regime, the way they are acting is as if, first of all, there was no Iran before Islam,
right.
and there was no
Well, that's what they want to
Iranian.
believe. I mean, that's what they want.
Well,
It's
good
year
luck with
zero.
that.
Like it's like
Good luck with that.
yeah,
Good luck with that.
exactly.
And then the other important thing, Jian John, is I think it is really important that we try to recognize all of those efforts that Iranians who were far away, living far away from home in exile, made to basically sustain cultural stuff. Like, show me one other nation which goes through a revolution. They flee their country. They find themselves in California. They find a parking to basically build their own home studio to produce and then smuggle those cassettes back to Iran. Afghans are also like that, but Iranians basically established that market in Los Angeles. And I think it is really important, if we know Haji Firuz, if I know Haji Firuz, if I know who Jamila is, if the famous Iranian dancer, if we grew up listening to all of these musics, I'm thankful to all of those smugglers, first of all. Then all of those pirate copies, horrible qualities, coming to Iran
Yeah.
from California. And I think now that I'm out of the country, it's my turn.
Okay, let me, because I know I can't keep you here forever, and I'm so grateful for as long as I've had you. Let me ask you three specific questions. By the way, there's so much that you're saying. I feel like we need to do a series, because I haven't even got to your documentaries. I want to ask you about Afghanistan, et cetera. So we have to do this again another day. But for today, let me ask you three remaining questions, specific ones.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would be remiss, I feel like, given this opportunity to not get some insight from you. I want to ask you about the LGBTQI community, both inside Iran and within Iranian Persian culture, contemporary culture, outside of Iran. So let me ask you, inside Iran, first of all, because you're not wrong. You intimated earlier in our chat that we hear all kinds of different things. I mean, depending on who you're talking to, you'll hear somebody say, nah, Baba, how'd you, they just do whatever you want in Iran. You just, the authorities look the other way and you do it, What would you say the condition or the plight, if you will, of the LGBTQ community currently in Iran is?
I think from the day that there was no source to today, we came a long way. I always say this. Khamenei used to use the word hamjansbaz, which is another equivalent to the F word, in his speeches. But when we created the word hamjansgara, a better term for homosexuality, and we mainstreamed it on air, on different radios and TVs, then even now Khamenei changed his mind, or now it has become so normal that he even say I'm just homosexuality. I think because of all of these sources that the LGBT community, most of them in Iran, have access to, internet, all of these debates and television and radios which are going to Iran, I think they have a better understanding of themselves. Of course, they are surrounded with loads of fake news. Of course, they are surrounded with loads of homophobia, loads of hate. But I think we are getting there. I don't see this current regime one day wakes up and say, "Oh yeah, LGBT is fine." No, that is not going to happen. But within Iranian society, that is happening. That is happening. And it is amazing to see, because I keep traveling to countries where next to Iran and where Iranians can travel. And I went to, I don't say which country because I don't want to create trouble, but I went to a gay club in one of these countries, and it was full of Iranians. I was like, oh, hello. Yeah, one of them was from Tehran, one of them was from Shiraz. And this is really interesting. Jian, can you believe till I left Iran, I didn't know we have LGBT individuals elsewhere in Iran. I always thought it is the communities within Tehran. The first time that I heard somebody with an Azeri accent, a gay man, or a lesbian with Shirazi accent, was when I traveled to Turkey to meet Iranian LGBT refugees. The communities used to be shattered, but I think now it is a different story. Now it is a different story.
But a question that I want to ask on top of that, and this is a more difficult one, is because structural, institutional, top-down, regime-based homophobia or discrimination is one thing, but and again, we don't have time to do this properly. We need a whole, series or another episode with you to do this. But I mean, I unfortunately, my personal experience in here in Toronto, the new epicenter of Iranians, etc., is that for Iranians outside of Iran, in Persian, I was going to say the men, but it's not just men. Homophobic jokes are still allowed, are still normal in a way that I don't think they are in the sort of English community. It's not a surprise to hear homophobic jokes at a dinner party with Iranians or a mehmoni of some kind. So feels like there's a long way to go.
Unconscious bias,
outside
right? You're
of
dealing with unconscious bias. It is unconscious bias. They don't know. They don't know. They don't know. They don't know. That's it. And that's why I keep saying we need to do it. We need to talk about it. Otherwise.
Final question to you.
Mhm.
I see all the things you're doing. You're a busy guy. You're an ambitious guy. I mean, we haven't even talked about your work with animals, in this 90 minutes so far, let alone you starting a podcast, and you've got all this stuff that you've done, different documentaries and TV programs and radio shows, and now you're moving to a new network, which we can't talk about, what we're going to talk about soon as you announce it. What is your, not to be too cliche with a final question, but what is your dream gig in terms of where Ali Hamedani would want to be 10 years from now?
To feel safe to be me. To feel safe to be me.
And you don't feel
It
that?
is not only sexual orientation, Jian. It is not only that. We are living with different layers of habits, cultural background, being a migrant. It is not safe to be me. I cannot be me. I cannot be me. I don't feel safe to be me. I cannot go to many mehmonis because people do not want me around. I cannot date non-Iranians. Well, I do, but it is difficult. I need to be cautious. And the reason is that part of me which loves Iran should not be too much because it could get too boring. Why should they care? I don't feel safe to sometimes dance in mehmonis because I don't want to live in a cliche like all gay men dance. I love dance, and I was in situations where people say, Ali, can you please control your body language because it's too gay, people will not take you seriously. So the dream is to feel safe to be me when I'm dating people, to feel safe to be me when I talk to friends, to feel safe when I talk to my friends in Iran, somebody is tapping, to feel safe to be an immigrant, which I always owe to this country. But again, you have to be very careful to feel safe to express myself. It's an issue.
I'm so grateful.
I wanted to say that I'm grateful that you let me talk and express myself. I'm really grateful.
Well, you do a great job of it. I don't know who wouldn't let you talk like this. You're eloquent and you've got an important story to tell, and I appreciate the work you do, and I appreciate the time you've given us, and it's only the beginning. I think I told you a few months ago, I hope you come to Toronto so we can do this in person. We haven't done that yet, but whether it's London or Toronto, I look forward to doing chatting in person as well.
I would love that.
خیلی متشکرم. Merci. Thank you for this.
مرسی جیان جان. Thank you so much. خیلی ممنون که گذاشتی حرف بزنم.
خداحافظ.
شب بخیر. اینجا شب شد. خداحافظ شما.
Ali Hamedani in London, England. That is full time for Roqe for today. Our website for all things Roqe related, roqemedia.com. roqemedia.com. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together each week. Talented Anahita, Smart Pegah, Super Parisa, Savvy Roham, Bearded Omid, Methodical Kabe. Thanks to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already on any or all of our platforms. Find the show on Instagram at Roqe Media. Find me on Instagram at Jian Gameshi. And as ever, keep it in mind, Mizun Bashin.